early early Homo species.
Say that again. It sounded really
I can't say it because I can't say the word
Neanderthal.
Yeah, convent. And it's
Covenant. Sorry.
The ancient world wasn't asking about DNA or geological epochs. It was asking about meaning and identity and science describes brain states. I'm sorry.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of From Art to Atoms,
The Ultimate Curiosity Show.
I'm Brandon Shoemaker.
I'm Michael Foles.
This week we are back. It's getting crazy time for me at school. How about you?
It's always crazy time at school for me. But yeah, we're about to go into tech rehearsals for a show that I'm playing tech in.
Yeah.
Next week.
And I'm 1 week out. 1 week from tomorrow, I will be at my first UIL competition.
Yeah.
Of the year. But I just found out this past Friday.
You got like 20,000 kids going to Indianapolis.
Bloomington.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I got the state right.
Yeah. We've got 10 superiors at the Texas State Thespians virtual festival. So we've got a total of, I think it's 14 kids that we will be taking to the International Festival this summer. Last year we took 6 kids. So we're moving on up. We've got 2 group competitions that we qualified for, one in musical theater, one in acting. So we've got those, and then a whole bunch of people that did other solo and duet events and things like that.
Your dog is digging for gold.
Yeah, in the chair. He's not going to find any.
And if he does, I claim it.
I claim it.
It might be your chair, but...
But what's going on in your world this week?
It's just regular week, like I said. Coming week or last week?
Both, either.
We're just trucking along. Honestly, we're trucking along. I mean, we're in the thicks of classes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I am.
And y'all didn't have a winter break like we did, so
no, yeah, we've gone straight through.
Yeah, you're still just waiting out for spring break. When is your spring break? It doesn't line up with ours, does it?
No, I
don't think so.
Ours is the end of March, last week of March.
Okay. Yeah, ours is sometime in April. I think ours coincides with Easter this year. Yours is like how ours used to be, where it's like college spring break sometime in the middle of March, and
midway through the semester.
Yeah. But so this week we are beginning something that we've been talking about doing for a long time. We're going to do our second 3-part series. This time it's going to be on science and religion. And let's go ahead and say this clearly at the start. This is not science versus religion. We're not staging the cage match. We're not awarding points. Our working assumption, and we're going to test this, is that both can be true.
I feel like this is like the Star Wars versus Star Trek episode we did in season 1 way back in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, we are not saying that one is better than the other.
Yeah.
They can coexist in the same worlds.
Yeah. Well, that was my argument, at least. You were arguing that Star Trek was better.
It is, but it is what it is. Anyway.
I hold to my position on the argument.
That's
anyway.
fine. That's fine. But, our goal here isn't to flatten differences or pretend there aren't tensions there.
No.
There are tensions, but they don't have to be automatically contradictory to each other. It doesn't mean that it's there.
Mm-hmm.
A violin string has tension, but that's what really kind of lets it make music.
That might be the nerdiest metaphor you've ever used, or at least the most artistically nerdiest.
Kind of feel like it's a dad joke almost in there too,
Uh-huh.
It's a very dad metaphor, but it is what it is.
Yeah. So, and science and religion have always been a very important part of my journey through faith. I was raised Southern Baptist with a very devout mother and a devout father, whereas you were raised Catholic,
mm-hmm.
which is a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah.
But my mom did this less than my dad, but my dad also taught me to be very discerning about what I would hear, particularly from specific pastors and things like that, because, when we were growing up, it was also the age of Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, and, where there were a lot of people that were saying these, supposedly holy things, but for very unholy purposes.
Yeah. No, like, so, we just started Lenten season, right?
Yeah.
So Mardi Gras was 2 weeks ago, and then Ash Wednesday happened on Wednesday. And so Mom, being up here, wanted to go to church on Wednesday night for Ash Wednesday to get ashes. So I was like, I'll go with you. So we went. And that was fine. So then,
and Thomas went too, right?
No.
Oh, he didn't. I thought I thought I saw him with ashes. Okay.
No.
Oh, okay.
Not after the incident with his high school where they told him he was going to hell because he was gay. That was the end of that.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't want nothing to do with that.
Gotcha.
So anyway, but so then Mom stopped going to church when she started working on Sundays, and we moved out the house and stuff like that. And she's mentioned several times. But she still has the placards, like the little cards that have the prayers and stuff like that around the house now in her room. And she's got a statue of Mary in her room also. And I was kind of like, so I'm assuming she wants to go. So I offered to take her on, starting with Lent, like the first Sunday of Easter last week. And so we went, and it's just, I don't know, for me. There's still a barrier there for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I grew up, like I said, in the Southern Baptist Church, but as I got to be a teenager, and it's a long story that we could do a whole episode on, so I'm not going to go through the whole spiel, but, I can say I came to my faith honestly and in a very personal way. And, what I, having been I always say I always wanted to study different sciences if there weren't math involved. But, because of that, I've always been, a very strong scholar, amateur scholar of qualitative sciences, at least.
Mm-hmm.
And I've through studying that and things like that, and understanding of my own religion and of the Bible, and learning to read the Bible in a literary way, as an English scholar too, I came to understand for me that science is just the method through which God works, because there are still so many things in science that we don't understand, and we think about all the things that we do understand now. 2,000 years ago, when the Bible was being written, at least the New Testament, all the things that we understand now that people had no understanding of back then, I see the Bible as a lot of metaphor to explain things in terms that people could understand. And so that's where I come from in terms of my own approach to faith, is that things are, that the two are not mutually exclusive, that they can coexist.
Right.
And so in this 3-part series, we're going to look at how that's possible.
Right.
And so we're going to do it by tackling some of the most quote unquote controversial topics in the debate between science and religion. And we're going to try to unpack those and see how, there are actual ways that the two can both be true if you adjust your way of thinking just a little bit.
Yeah.
And so today we're starting with evolution, which historically has been the flashpoint. If there's a topic that people assume draws a hard line between science and faith, usually it's that.
Right. And it's weird doing this. We just got finished studying genetic variation in class, like calculating genetic variation in class in populations or whatever. And every year as a teacher, when we start evolution, it's in our standards, so we have to teach it.
Yeah.
But it's a conversation you have to have with your kids prior, and it's something that I make sure I tell them, look, I'm not here to tell you this is how it is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to tell you this is what science believes.
Yeah.
You take that, and then I would encourage you to take that and go home with it. Talk to your parents.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to your pastor. Talk to whoever you need to talk about and make your own conclusions on that.
Yeah.
Don't believe one or the other just because,
Yeah.
And so it is one of the most understood scientific theories.
Misunderstood, you mean?
Yes, sorry. In modern culture, like it really is. And it wasn't until, the 60s, 50s, 60s where it really kind of people took it and turned it into what it is today. Like the posters, when you think of evolution, people think of like the picture of the chimpanzee and then it morphs over 5 or 6 humanoid figures into a human. And that's a fear. I don't know what you would even call it. That's just fear mongering on people's misunderstanding of what this is.
Yeah.
So before we go anywhere near the theological part of it, we really have to understand what it is.
Yeah.
I tell the kids basically evolution is just simply change over time.
Yeah.
That's what it is. At its core, it's simply the idea that populations of organisms are changing through time with small modifications here and there.
Yeah.
Okay. The phrase descent with modification came from Charles Darwin. Like that's in the origin of species through, descent with modifications. He really is, and then we start with him. Like there's always a scientist that kind of covers every unit. And we look at genetics. Gregor Mendel is the guy, the pea guy that everyone knows about that studied peas, pea plants and stuff like that. He's that guy. Crick and Watson were the ones who did DNA. There's always a scientist that's associated with, I guess, the major themes of, and Charles Darwin in the early 1800s is really that guy. And you have to understand Darwin's take on this is that he was not setting out to make vast scientific discoveries.
Yeah.
He was a naturalist. He liked studying nature.
Yeah.
Like it was that. His parents wanted him to study medicine. He said no. He studied theology as a kid. And so he kind of has a deep religious understanding and background and faith while he's making these discoveries on his voyage around with the Beagle, the HMS Beagle of his ship that he was on.
Yeah.
And again, he was not the captain. He was not the cook. He was not the deck scrubber. He was just an observer to nature.
Yeah.
He put him on a boat and he started looking at things. And Darwin was just this guy who was just basically, like I said, he did not set out to make these vast discoveries. He just observed things and wrote them down.
Yeah.
And I tell the kids, I really think Home Dude had some OCD.
Yeah.
Because his drawings and his attention to detail is meticulous in these. And so it really, like I said, he was not there to make vast discoveries. And he struggled. His wife was very Christian. He was very Christian, but he struggled with what he was finding out.
Yeah.
It's like making these discoveries and questioning things like, so, the example of his finches, like that's one of the animals, I guess, that he's mostly known for, the tortoise and the Galapagos and the finches. And, and the thing with the finches is their beaks were all different. They were all living on different islands and in different areas of the island with different food sources. And they were all offshore. They were not on the mainland. So his question is like, well, how the hell did all these finches get the hell out here? They're on an island. Well, and looking at this, he's like, there had to have been a common ancestor that came over from the mainland. And then as food sources varied from island to island, and all of the different islands, some islands were rocky terrain, some islands were not, so you had different food sources, different environments. And over time, the ones with the adaptations for that environment survived and reproduced more.
Yeah.
Which then became a different population of finch, so he's just seeing these observations and is like, the hell am I going to do with this? This is fighting everything I've known.
Yeah.
And so Darwin really kind of sat down and he kind of bookshelved his ideas. For a good 20 years, I believe it was. Like he did not want to ruffle feathers.
Right.
He was not trying to get lynched by the mobs.
Yeah.
And then so what ended up happening, and you have to understand too, also he lost his daughter, very young daughter, to I forget what disease it was, but she died to yellow fever or something. Something that was not curable back then. And I tell the kids that too, that there was at this time and age, when you put yourself in his place, who are you blaming for that?
Yeah.
I do what I'm supposed to do. I live a good life. And this is what happens to me. Why am I being punished, kind of thing? And so Wallace, there was another scientist named Wallace who kind of was making observations at the same time he was. And Darwin got word that he was going to start publishing some stuff. And his wife was like, look, you need to get your name out there.
Yeah.
And so Darwin published it. And I asked the kids, I said, so who do you think won the battle? And they're like, well, Darwin's name's on the top of our paper, so obviously him. And I'm like, you're right. We don't know. We know about Wallace, but we don't study him.
Right.
It's just that descent with modification, because it just means that offspring are slightly different from their parents.
Mm-hmm.
The finches were just slightly different from a common ancestor.
Right.
Based on the environment. So over many generations, these small differences can accumulate to become what they are.
Yeah.
So the mechanism most people don't know, or most people do know, is natural selection.
Yeah.
And that was his theory, natural selection through descent with modification. So natural selection is how evolution happens. It's the mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to understand also that within a population, there's variation. When we look at people, people are very difficult. Let me say, when we look at evolution, because their traits are not carried on just one or two traits, like your eye color or even skin tone or hair tone. When you look at a person, it's not brown and blue for eye color. It's about 20 shades of brown,
right?
Blue with different brown and some greens, and so it's very polygenetic. Many gene traits that we have. So people are complicated.
Okay.
So when we look at this, when we teach it, we try to stick with simple things.
Yeah.
Sometimes just flowers. Sometimes like beetles. Just a simple kind of organism that is like it's flowers. Some flowers are like either red or white. There is no in between. You know what I mean? Like it's just some are tall or short. So that when Mendel looked at his traits, that's why Mendel did peas, because peas are pretty easy because their traits only have two variations. A pea plant's either tall or short.
Okay.
A pea plant, the pea itself is either wrinkled or round. It is either yellow or green. There is no yellow green or, like different shades, a light green and a dark hunter green.
Okay.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so that's why Mendel's plants were really, when he looked at genetics, that's why his plants were novel, because they did that. They were two traits. So we see variation in populations. And again, variation is just simply just the differences.
Yeah.
Right. And so some of the variation gives certain individuals in the population an advantage, and in doing that, it's the advantage that they can survive and reproduce in the environment they're living in. And that's what we call fitness. Like when I talk to the kids, I'm like, so what does fitness mean to you? Like, oh, it's the strongest. I'm like, in this case, I don't want you to think that it is the strongest, because sometimes the weakest is the best fit for the environment. It just depends on where you're living and where you're at.
Yeah.
So when we say survival of the fittest, it is simply just, what is your environment and which one's better for you to live in and reproduce? That's the name of the game. It's not just living in it. It is living long enough to reproduce and pass on the trait to another offspring.
Yeah.
So again, some of these the traits are advantageous over time. And so how does this happen? Like, how does the variations happen? Well, you have mutations, which are random, that can introduce new variation. That's where I think a lot of confusion comes into play, because mutations are not chosen. They're just your body's mistake of putting an adenine instead of a guanine in your DNA when it redoes it.
Right.
It's simply the typewriter pressed the wrong key and didn't backspace that sucker.
Yeah.
And so there are changes just in the DNA that aren't directed towards a goal at all. It is just a random, it just happened. So, but natural selection's not random. That's the thing. It's what I say, like, it's exactly what it is. It's nature selecting what organism is better adapted to the environment it's living in. And so nature will select these traits that simply work better. And there's other ways of introducing variation into the population. You have traits move into a population, which is called immigration. We have traits that move out. It's what we call gene flow. What is moving in and what's moving out.
Okay.
So genes, I want you to think of like gene pool is the term. It's basically all the different, in a population, all the different alleles or traits that are in that population. Okay. And so a population, again, can be a population of ants in an anthill. Well, if one anthill, we pick up some ants from one anthill and move it to another one that's a couple of meters away, that's introducing whatever traits they had in the old anthill into the new one. So that's an immigration of an animal and then taking some out.
Okay.
There's just different ways to get variation in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just stop there. I'll just cut it short.
Okay.
But and teaching in Southwest Arkansas, teaching Northeast Texas.
Yeah.
We are in the area where specifically religion reigns.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so as a teacher, I had to go in and basically say, okay, so how am I going to approach this?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jessica was the one who talked to me about Kenneth Miller, who's the author of the book that we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
He's a theologian. He wrote a book called Finding Darwin's God.
Yeah.
He makes this distinction very clearly that calling evolution pure chance is scientifically inaccurate.
Yeah.
Random variation filtered through a non-random process produces order over time, which it does.
Okay.
It brings the population to a stability.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens with that, it's not I guess when you read the book, you come out of the idea that evolution isn't a cosmic dice roll.
Yeah.
In so much that it's actually just a lawful biological process operating over deep time.
Okay.
Like it's not just there, the traits are gone.
Yeah.
It's cosmically order. It's the universe bringing order to things, which goes against everything we believe in because the universe is supposed to be going to chaos. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But that's really, what that book is about. And it really kind of helped me get a grasp on how to talk to these kids that they have Bible study on Wednesdays.
Right.
At lunch.
Yeah.
On their own.
Mm-hmm.
No one's leading it, but we provide a room.
Mm-hmm.
And they come to school with their Bibles like it's their textbook.
Yeah.
So how am I going to teach this process to these kids and still respect everything? So it was a really insightful book to kind of read and kind of look at.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's a nutshell, the science aspect of, this process.
So random mutation and natural selection don't negate the potentiality of God having created everything.
Correct.
So, but randomness at one level doesn't equal meaninglessness across the board.
Yeah.
Weather patterns contain randomness, but that doesn't mean climate science is chaos.
Yeah.
Mutation generates variation and then natural selection shapes it, right?
Yeah. Like just think about how much time has gone by. Like, so over billions of years, and we're talking like what life has been around, I guess 3.5-4 billion years maybe on Earth, that process is really producing all of the diversity of life that we see today. Like everything is led to this moment kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
From the extinction of plants and animals 2,000 years, 2 million years ago, whatever you want to say, that has led to what we have now. It is the bedrock, the foundation of what we have now.
Okay. So scientifically, evolution is about change over time, driven by variation and natural selection.
Yes.
Which does not sound inherently anti-religious, but culturally, evolution has become framed as the thing that pushed God out of the picture.
Correct.
So where does that perception come from?
Well, and again, so part of it comes from history. Okay, so like I said, Charles Darwin published this book on the origin of species in just about 1859. And so the idea that species were not fixed, that humans shared ancestry with other life, was destabilizing. Like I said, they were going to pitchfork this guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was a challenge to the literal readings of the book of Genesis.
Yeah.
And so what Miller, like I said, what I like about Miller is that he argues that there's a deeper conflict that isn't between evolution and the belief in God. It's between evolution and the very specific kind of theological claim, one that expects kind of direct special creation of each species exactly as we see it now.
Right.
But here's another key point that Miller makes. We have to be careful about what kind of God we're trying to defend. And if God is defined as the explanation for whatever science can't currently explain, like we can't explain some things in death. We can't explain coming back from death, like when you have a near-death experience or, something like that. It's what we call God in the gaps. It's that what we can't explain through science,
it's because of God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That scientific process or progress will always feel threatening. So no matter what, that's what's going to happen. And because every time we understand something better, that gap shrinks.
So the danger then is really tying faith to what we don't know.
Isn't it always?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's tying it to ignorance. It always is.
Yeah.
But Miller's argument isn't that if belief depends on scientific mystery, then faith becomes fragile. Like he's not saying that there's a fragility in the faith itself. But if a belief is grounded on something deeper, like in the existence of the natural law itself of evolution or any of the scientific laws, or in the meaning or moral awareness, then scientific discovery doesn't threaten it.
Right.
And it really should give support to it. I think that's what he kind of drove home for me. That's what I took from this.
Yeah. So here's where I feel the emotional tension, though. For a lot of people of faith, the discomfort isn't just about mechanisms, how things happen. It's about identity.
Right.
If humans evolved through the same biological process as every other species, then what makes us unique?
Yeah.
Where does the soul fit in? What does that do to the story of Adam and Eve? Those aren't trivial questions, but and here is also where I differ a lot with other Christians is that, a lot of Christianity believes that humans are the only things with souls. I'm sorry. I look into the eyes of, I was about to say my dog, which is true, but really almost any animal, I can't help but see the soul behind those eyes.
Yeah, no. And so I'll say this on that aspect of it. When we went to the elephant sanctuary, and that was my big thing there, was that we got to touch the elephants, and I've never touched an elephant before. Had personal one-on-one time with it. And you get personal one-on-one time with it. You feed it. And while you're feeding it, you got to do this while you're feeding it, because once you're done with food, they don't care about you no more. But literally walked up to it and put my hand right around its eye. Its eye was right in the kind of cleft of my hand.
Yeah.
And just felt it. And just looked in its eye. You know what I mean? There's definitely something more there than just reaction to stimulus.
Yeah.
And the theories, they're not trivial questions that you bring up, as far as what makes us unique and where does the soul fit into us, and how does this theory of evolution affect the Adam and Eve stories and stuff like that. Miller doesn't dismiss these questions.
Yeah.
He's a practicing Christian. Like I said, he's a theologian. He doesn't argue that evolution disproves God. He argues that evolution reshapes how we think about divine action.
Okay.
So one of the most interesting ideas he proposes is that the world is capable of generating complexity through its own lawful processes that might reflect a deeper form of design than a world that requires constant supernatural intervention.
Yeah.
Instead of God as a mechanic constantly adjusting parts, think of the fact that you get a God as an author of a universe with built-in creative potential.
Yeah, and that's where I really find and now I haven't read the book yet, but just everything that you've told me, that's where I start to find what he's saying kind of beautiful, because that also speaks to me heavily as a creative. Because if you were to ask me, how you'll have these personality quizzes and things like that, if you were to ask me what is the one character trait about myself that I value most deeply, I would probably have to say creativity.
Right.
Because I've talked about on here before, I'm a theater director, I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I'm a painter, I'm a wanting to be a sculptor, any type of creative outlet, I want to get my hands on it. I want to do it. So when you talk about, God as giving us creative potential, and nature creative potential, that's the part that really speaks to me personally.
Yeah. And, it's a beautiful thing when you think about it. The problem, though, is that, and I think this is where the people get the hang up on that, is that it's a paradigm shift of thinking.
Right.
You're going to have to let go of very interventionist picture of how creation works.
Right.
You've got to reshape how your thinking on this is.
So in our conversation today, we're going to unpack it very slowly with what evolution actually claims, where it genuinely presses on certain theological interpretations, and whether those pressures destroy faith or just redefine it or refine it, frankly. Because if truth is unified, then scientific truth and theological truth can't ultimately contradict, although people's individual interpretations of it might.
Yeah. So, and that's really kind of exactly it. And it's like evolution isn't the end of the conversation. It's really the beginning of it, the start of it.
Okay, so let me see if I can just recap the main points of what you said evolution basically is. Okay, so first you've got variation. Everything, even siblings are going to be slightly different on the DNA molecular level. Second, inheritance. So some of those differences are passed down genetically. The third is mutation, where DNA occasionally changes randomly. And then the fourth is natural selection.
Right.
Which is where certain inherited traits make survival and reproduction more likely in a specific environment.
Correct.
And then continues those traits to make them more common across generations.
Yeah, and that's it. That's the driving engine force behind this whole theory. Like, you don't need the drama. All you need is time for it to play out.
Right, because we're not talking about a monkey waking up and deciding to become a human.
No more than you can wake up to decide to be short.
Yeah.
Or a short person decide to become tall.
Yeah.
You know, like, it doesn't happen that way. And so, you know, thank you for saying that, because that caricature of the monkey waking up one day to become a man never dies.
The diagram
did not,
about.
the humans did not evolve from modern monkeys. We share a common ancestor with other primates. And those two words, common ancestor, are very specific in when we teach it. Like, you know, evolution branches like a tree, not like a ladder. It's not a progression of up.
Yeah.
It is a branching off of it. That's what we call the tree of life. You know, you've heard that. So there's no species is higher or lower. You know, every living species today is equally evolved. We've just adapted to different areas that we live in.
Yeah.
You know, and this branching pattern is exactly what we see in the genetics of species.
Okay.
So one of the strongest lines that we have as far as evidence for this isn't fossils. And we do teach, we have, like the kids did last week, they did a station lab for evidence of evolution. Like, there are 5 different pieces of evidence that we can use to kind of show that the evolution has occurred. And the most convincing, I guess the strongest line right now is DNA. And you have to understand also that Darwin didn't understand genetics. It wasn't a thing in his time frame. You know, this has only been since the 50s that we've really kind of gotten a grasp of DNA. But when we compare a human DNA to a chimpanzee DNA, we see that 98% to 99% of their DNA is similar. You know, it doesn't mean that we're basically chimps. If we were, we'd have 100%.
Right.
You know, it means that we share an ancestry. And when you think of DNA, it's like I tell the kids also, it's like me and my twin sister compared to me and my cousin. Who has the closest DNA? Me and my sister? Similar DNA.
Yeah.
Me and Marcel, or me and my cousin?
Yeah.
My sister does. Okay, so what does that mean? That means you're close related to her. Exactly. That's how we look at that. You know, and we have them in that lab. We have them counting DNA patterns for a particular protein, cytochrome C, which basically is a protein that's used in cell respiration. Okay, so we use this protein as a basis of study because every organism that takes in oxygen and gives off CO2, goes through cell respiration, has to have this protein to work. Okay. And so we can use all this protein's mechanism to see really the sequence of this protein. We can compare the amino acid sequence. And if you and Luca share of the 10 amino acids that make that protein, and there's more than 10, if you share 8 of those with him, but you share 6 of those with, let's say, the cat down the street, you're more closely related to the one you share the sequence with. Yeah. So what's even more interesting, though, is that there are things called endogenous retroviruses. You know, viral DNA that's inserted itself into the genomes millions of years ago. Humans and other primates share identical viral insertions in identical locations in our DNA. Okay. So I want you to think of this, and it's not easily explained by separate independent creation events. This retrovirus is not in our DNA separately from chimpanzee or other primates. It was put in there into a common ancestor, and that's been followed every single succession of the tree.
Okay.
It's almost like we insert, I'm going to try to use a tree example, I guess. We insert at the base of the trunk of the tree a coloration gene. What this is saying is that basically the retrovirus gene, the coloration of the gene, that the example, the coloration gene, is inserted at the base of the trunk of the tree and therefore seen in every leaf on the tree itself. The DNA is not inserted separately in each branch of the tree.
Yeah.
Magically, all the leaves look the same.
Yeah.
So that, I guess that symbolism of that it was inserted in a common ancestor is how it got there. And so it's not easily explained by separate independent creation events. Like I said, it's not, we didn't get it in there and then, oh, look, the chimpanzee got it also in there. Oh, look, a gorilla got it in there.
Yeah.
It didn't happen that way.
Yeah.
It didn't just happen to be in every single species of primate or hominid has it in there. So that's what you would expect if we came from shared lineage, is that we would have it in all of us through shared lineage.
Yeah.
When Kenneth Miller talks about this kind of molecular evidence in Finding Darwin's God, he emphasizes that modern genetics didn't weaken Darwin's theory, and again, it strengthened it.
Right.
Darwin didn't even know, like I said, about DNA. This was the 1850s when he published his book. His research in the 1820s. We didn't know anything about DNA until the structure was, we knew in the 1850s about traits, parents looking like kids looking like parents. We didn't know the mechanism until DNA was really discovered, structure and everything in the 50s.
Yeah.
1950s. So the genetic record lines up with all of his predictions. So we're talking about a guy who made predictions 100 years prior to even knowing how.
Yeah.
But made those predictions.
And that's what gets me, because, Darwin didn't have a microscope to look at a DNA molecule. He was just working with barnacles and pigeons.
Correct. That's really, though, what makes the predictive power of the theory so impressive. Like I said, he was a naturalist. He was just making observations, writing them down, and saying, look, these look like this.
Yeah.
So
now you mentioned a term earlier that I want us to come back to. You mentioned the term deep time. Go into a little bit about what that means.
So evolution requires vast stretches of time. Like it doesn't happen in 100 years, 200 years. We're talking billions of years.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, 3.5 to 4 billion years life has been on Earth. Meaning the Earth is much older, than that. We can use radiometric dating. Really, we just look at radioactive decay on isotopes of certain elements. They allow us to date, rocks with pretty good precision. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. Life appeared very early in that timeline, about 3.5 billion years ago. And honestly, as humans and even complex multicellular life, like something that's more than one single celled organism, modern day plants, that even ancient plants, we've only been around roughly about 600 million years. So we're talking about, we are a little bitty dot on the long grand scheme of things here.
And then humans, I'm guessing, are even much
shorter, about 300,000 years.
Wow.
That's if you compress Earth's time into a 24-hour period, humans are going to arrive in the final seconds right before midnight. Like that's how insignificant, as far as we've been around, of this whole thing. And the scale matters. Evolution isn't some dramatic overnight transformation. Like I said, you cannot just go wake up and be, I want to be tall. Boom. It doesn't happen that way. It's incremental changes over, we're talking a staggering amount of time.
Yeah. And that's just hard for our brains to even process, because, we can think in decades, maybe in centuries if we're lucky. But, when we're talking about all these changes happening over millions of years, like our brains just kind of shut down with it. Like I tell my kids when I'm talking about development of language, I use the term evolution of language. And I tell them, even it takes a while, but it's a lot easier to see than evolution in life, because, even with language, you're talking about a few hundred years as compared to a few million years.
Yeah, no, our intuition is really bad at geological time. Like we can't fathom that. Like I have a poster in my classroom that says, if evolution has a time, so do you. You know what I mean? Because kids will sit there and go, oh my God, this class is taking forever. I'm like, baby, you don't know what forever means. You know what I mean? Like you have no idea. Our perception of time is just not, it's not there. So one of the things we do have to talk about, though, is how do the branches of the tree of life kind of diverge,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it's a process called speciation. So it's basically how a new species forms.
Okay.
So it can become, and this is what we were talking about with we just finished this up Friday in class, how speciation occurs. There are different variations or different mechanisms that this can happen in.
Okay.
Okay. It happens often when a population becomes isolated. Now, a population can be isolated for various amounts of reasons. We have different environments applied differently to selective pressures. And so on Friday, I'm like, so what's a selective pressure? What's pressure? Let me just say that. What's pressure?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like something that forces something. I'm like, right. So I go and stand behind one of the kids and I just kind of put my head right over behind her, but on kind of like looking over her shoulder.
Yeah.
And you can kind of feel her eyes looking at me on the side. She kind of looks and then she kind of leans over.
Yeah.
She leans over and I'm like, okay, so what did I just have you do? I just pressured you to move. And did I pressure you to move in a certain direction? Yeah, you moved in the direction I was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
That's selective pressure. I forced you to move in a certain direction. All right. So like I said, we have to get into speciation, or like how new species form. So this happens when populations become isolated. And we talked about different mechanisms of isolation. There are 4 that we teach the kids.
Uh-huh.
There's geographical.
Okay.
An organism, if it lives in a different area, is never going to breed with another organism.
Right.
They're not going to come into contact with each other.
Yeah.
And that can happen through, like, if you think of like the rainforest or like a subpopulation of, let's say, like tree frogs.
Okay.
Or lizards. Lizards are better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's say that a volcano erupts all of a sudden somewhere where lizards live, and lava flows down where they live, and it separates whatever lizard was on one side of the lava flow was now on that side. And, it was random. It wasn't like they chose to be on that side.
They parted ways amicably.
Correct, right. They just ran for their lives, and whoever got stuck on one side got stuck on the other side. So that's geographically isolated. Like they will no longer breed together.
Okay.
We look at temporal differentiation. Like some birds go through a time period of breeding that some other birds, their breeding season's different.
Yeah.
They'll never come in contact with because it's not the time.
Mm-hmm.
They also have behavioral. Some mating rituals for certain organisms will not mean anything to another one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's behavioral. Okay. And then the other one is simply mechanical. The parts don't fit.
Okay.
Or the parts don't fit. The parts don't even go together.
Yeah.
Like sex organs are not the same for all species, right? So I tell the kids all the time, like an elephant's never going to be able to mate with a fruit fly. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Let alone the chromosomal numbers have to match up and stuff like that too. Like we're not even talking about that aspect. We're just talking about those barriers.
The mechanics, like you said.
Right. So, different environments apply differently to selective pressures. Now, again, pressures can be put on it where you have what we call directional pressure. So I want you to think of a bell curve.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to kids about their grades using a bell curve. Everyone's going to kind of fall between that C range.
Yeah.
You got the outliers of the A's and the outliers of the F's on either side of the curve, right? Directional is where you curve their test. You're pulling one side better than the other.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So let's say that you have finches, right? And you have beak size. So they have big, strong beaks for cracking tough nuts and seeds. You have little baby beaks for little baby seeds. And then you have a medium-sized beak. Okay. I'm going to use all 3 of these examples. And again, I want you to think the bell curve.
Yeah.
The medium-sized beaks are going to be in the middle. Majority of the birds have that. Directional is basically all the food sources for something happens, and the only food source on this island where all 3 birds live are the large, tough nuts. Well, what's that going to do to the population? The small beak ones are going to die because they don't have food anymore.
Yeah.
The medium ones some are going to survive if they're closer to the larger side beak, but you've changed the population because now who's going to survive more is the large beak ones.
Right.
That's directional. We moved into one direction.
Okay.
Let's say this island, something happens and all the big, large seeds, a drought, they died, and all the small seeds died. So in the middle now we have the best fit there. So if you're in the middle, you're best fit. And so that's called stabilizing selection.
Okay.
That's where the population is stable. Okay. And then you have what we call disruptive selection, where basically the medium-sized beaks are no longer fit to the environment. And so now you have the outliers.
Okay.
So you have 3 types of selection or speciation, one where middle's good, one where the sides are good, and one where either side is better.
Right.
Okay. And so that's our selection mechanisms. That's how it's going.
Yeah.
So through enough generations, the population can diverge genetically until they can no longer interbreed. We observe this process in plants, insects, and some vertebrates. So it's not hypothetical. This actually happens.
Yeah.
Evolution doesn't claim that one species suddenly gives birth to a completely different species.
Yeah.
It claims that populations slowly diverge over time until they become distinctively different. And I want you to think language. Like Latin didn't suddenly turn into French, right? It gradually shifted across regions based on geographically where people were until mutual intelligibility broke down.
Yeah.
Biology is very similar to that.
Yeah. That analogy helps, just like how, when I teach that side of things about language evolving over time, but then also nobody freaks out when Spanish and Italian share the same roots.
Correct. That's exactly right. So what Miller is making an important philosophical point, though. He argues that people often confuse unpredictability with purposelessness.
Yeah.
Mutation is not guided toward future goals, but that doesn't mean that the universe lacks structure. It simply means like natural selection operates within physical laws. Chemistry, thermodynamics, ecology, it's all constrained and shaped by those laws.
Okay.
So he suggests that the universe is governed by constant natural laws, and we know this, and they may actually allow for a more profound view of divine creativity. So instead of constant miraculous interruptions, you get creation capable of unfolding. And it doesn't prove God, but it also doesn't disprove him.
Yeah. So then the real question becomes less of did evolution happen and more what kind of world would God create?
Exactly. He's the painter painting the canvas. And would it be a world that requires constant supernatural patchwork?
Right.
Or is the world robust enough to develop complexity on its own?
Right.
Kind of did he put the pieces in place to make it unfold this way automatically?
Right.
So it's a theological conversation, not a biological one.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at humans specifically, the evidence is really overwhelming.
Okay.
We see the fossil record. So we have a progression in the fossils, early Homo species, Neanderthals, Denisovans, modern Homo sapiens. Like we see the progression through the fossil record into modern day Homo sapiens.
Yeah. So, and I've heard that genetics even confirms interbreeding between modern humans and Neanderthals.
Yes, that is correct. That's not a threat to dignity. It's a record of history. And so he makes this point that biological continuity doesn't erase moral or spiritual uniqueness, just simply that evolution describes physical developments. It doesn't define the meaning of those developments. Like that distinction is super critical in understanding this kind of paradigm shift of what's going on here.
Yeah, because evolution essentially answers the how rather than the why.
Correct. And so science explains really the mechanisms, like I talked, mechanisms of evolution, like we talked about how this works. Religion wrestles with the purpose of everything. So confusing both of these creates an unnecessary conflict that I think a lot of people find themselves in.
Right. So evolution isn't chaos. It's not anti-God by default. It's not monkeys turning into people overnight.
Yes.
It's variation, inheritance, mutation, selection, operating over deep time, producing branching diversity.
Correct.
And now the real tension begins, because if that's how life developed, what do we do with the book of Genesis?
And there we go. And that's where the biology goes into the theology.
Yeah, because, like I said, I discovered for myself early on that a lot of the Bible is literary and it's interpretive and it's metaphorical. And so I consider the book of Genesis to be that metaphor. So, but that's my personal opinion. So, there are other people who have come up with other solutions for it and things like that. But so we've laid out the science, and if somebody listening to this is coming from, a heavy spiritual background and a background of faith, then here's where the discomfort probably really starts.
Correct.
Because for many believers, the issue isn't whether species change over time, it's whether evolution undermines the story of creation itself.
Yeah.
Because Genesis describes God creating humans intentionally, distinctly, and in his image. It describes a world where death only enters after the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And, but evolution requires death long before humans ever show up. Predation, extinction, millions of years of struggle. So the question isn't just scientific, it's theological at that point. If death existed for millions of years before Adam and Eve, then what does that do to the doctrine of the fall? What does that do to original sin?
Yeah.
And so that's, and I believe you mentioned earlier, that's where, Miller kind of has commentary on that too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not a small adjustment.
Yeah.
It's kind of where the conversation has to kind of slow down on stuff.
Right.
So Miller doesn't pretend that evolution neatly plugs into every literal reading of Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he argues that evolution challenges certain interpretations of scripture, especially when you're looking at like the young earth creationism and strictly literal timelines, but by challenging that interpretation, that isn't the same thing as disproving faith itself.
Yeah. It's that distinction is important because, I think for a lot of people, faith and interpretation get fused together.
Mm-hmm.
If one piece shifts, it feels like the whole structure collapses.
Correct.
So let's talk about literal reading questions. If somebody believes that, like if you do the math that exists in the Bible and you adhere to everything in the Bible as literal and truthful, then you're looking at, believing that the earth is around 6,000 years old and that all species were created exactly as they are today.
Yeah.
And that there was no animal death before the fall. Evolution contradicts everything there directly.
Right.
And there's no way around that. And that's, literally, if you're looking at that interpretation, you're also looking at things like humans and dinosaurs living at the same time
together,
and, and that was, I'll never forget, that was actually the last time I was in a Sunday school class. I was in my 20s and I went to, I hadn't been to Sunday school in ages. And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? I'll try it out. And I think it was only the second or third Sunday that I went that our group leader popped in a VHS, because that's how old I am. We are. Who am I kidding? And
What's
it was
a VHS. I don't know what you're talking about. I've been around since just the DVD age.
Liar. You're older than me. But anyway, he popped in a VHS that was a preacher explaining how it makes perfect sense that humans and dinosaurs lived together harmoniously. And that was when I said, I'm out. I mean, I didn't say that, obviously, to the guy. I was respectful. And
I ain't coming back, though.
Well, exactly. And that was the last time I went to a Sunday school class because I was like, I cannot. No.
Yeah. Miller is very clear that a scientific evidence for deep time, and common ancestry is very overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like we talked about how we just don't have the geological time down. We can't fathom billions of years, But if someone holds a strictly young earth view, evolution's going to feel like an attack to that person.
Right.
So, but here's the interesting thing. Christians wrestled with how to interpret Genesis long before Darwin in the 1800s.
And that's the part that I really appreciated discovering.
Right. Augustine, writing in the 4th century, cautioned believers against tying the credibility of Scripture to specific scientific claims about the natural world. He warned that if Christians made confident claims about nature that later turned out to be false, it's really going to damage the faith's credibility. And that was over 1,000 years before Darwin even talked about evolution.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what we said early on about, if you tie faith to ignorance of the natural world, then you're setting yourself up for
failure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you are purposely putting yourself in between the two ideas, you know?
So really, if you look at it, you know, according to, like you said, with St. Augustine and everything, this idea that Genesis might not be a modern scientific account isn't a 19th century panic response. It's an ancient conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
But let's stay with the hard part. If evolution is true, then animals lived and died for millions of years before humans existed. And that means suffering predates humanity. So for many believers, death is tied theologically to sin. So if death existed long before human moral failure, how do we reconcile that?
Well, and this is one of the most emotionally charged tensions, I guess, internally with people. You know, what Miller's suggesting is that Genesis accounts may be addressing spiritual separation rather than introducing biological mortality into kind of this previously immortal ecosystem.
Right.
You know, so in other words, the death in the fall narrative may be theological death, you know, alienation from God, rather than that sudden beginning of predation and entropy in the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
You know, it's really, like I said, it's a paradigm switch of how you can kind of see this working, you know? And
again,
so,
it's opening yourself up to metaphor instead of literalism.
Correct. And that's an interpretive move.
Yeah.
You know, not everyone agrees with it. And it's one of the way thoughtful believers attempt to reconcile evolutionary history with scripture. And I'll point this out also, though, in this one. You know, Genesis says the world was created in 7 days. 7 days is a man-made time period.
Yeah.
The calendar, the calendar is a man-made thing. You know, and so what I always believe, I guess I take from reading this and doing that, is that we don't work in man's time, we work in God's time. If you're a believer, it can happen still, but in his time.
Well, yeah, I remember when I was in 6th grade, my science teacher told, because somebody had asked this very question, and he said, you know, well, yeah, the Bible says that God created the world in 7 days, but who's to say what a day is to God?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I always held on to that statement, and it really spoke to me because, you know, yeah, that makes total sense that what a day is to God would, you know, be an epoch to us. So, but back to what we were talking about originally. So, you know, instead of saying no animal ever died before Adam was birthed out of the clay, the argument shifts to really the fall is describing a rupture in relationship, not the invention of biology as we know it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, all right. So then there's another big tension point.
Yeah. We talked about the uniqueness of humans.
Yeah. Oh, we did already talk about that?
No, you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah. So if humans share ancestry with other primates, then what does it mean to be made in the image of God? You know, are we just highly evolved animals? Is there anything qualitatively different about us? Because the religious claim isn't just that humans are smart, it's that we have moral awareness, spiritual capacity, self-reflection. And I have my own interpretations that I'll talk about after. But, you know, what does evolution say about that? Does it flatten all that out?
Well, so Miller would argue that biological continuity doesn't erase spiritual significance. That it actually explains the development of our bodies and brains.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't determine metaphysical claims about souls or mortal worth. And again, it is strictly just biological. So you can accept that a human brain developed through evolutionary processes and kind of still believe that we bear our unique morals and spiritual responsibility. Science can describe neural activity, but it can't measure dignity.
Right.
So that's kind of really where I guess people have problems.
Yeah. It's, you know, if someone expects science to prove or disprove the soul, they're asking the wrong tool to do the wrong job. You know, a microscope isn't built to detect meaning.
Right.
And in terms of, like, you know, going back to the created in the image of God, I think everybody always says, oh, well, that means that God looks just like us. I think it's a lot deeper than that. I think, you know, humans being created in the image of God is more about, again, creativity.
Yeah.
He is a creator, and he made us to be creators.
I think it also plays into the fact that, like with the the geophysical time period. Like we can't fathom that.
Yeah.
We try to make sense of things we can't fathom.
Right.
And I go back to Star Trek on this, like when they meet an alien that doesn't look like them, what does the alien always want to do though? Like when the prophets saw Benjamin Sisko, what form did they take?
A human.
Why?
Familiarity.
Right. To make him feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I think that we do kind of the same thing in that aspect of, you know what I'm saying? Like we give God that sense of what he looks like us. Like when I think of God, and this is my childhood interpretation.
Yeah.
God is a old man with a white beard and white long hair and a white robe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's like, when now
he's Santa Claus.
Yeah. Yeah. He looks like Santa Claus wearing a different outfit. When I think of God today, it's weird because I used to have that exact same image.
Yeah.
But when I think of God today, I can't even picture an image because my personal belief is that God is something so expansive that, I a lot of times I don't even refer to God as he anymore because it's certainly something that supersedes gender. But I think of it as God being literally in everything, in every atom of existence, and Christians do believe that, God is around us always in everything, I believe that too, just on an atomic scale or subatomic scale.
I use that in my classroom, but he's watching.
Yeah. Yeah.
You better behave because he's everywhere and he watches you in this classroom. I need to give me one of them signs.
Yeah.
Picture of Jesus above my door going, I see you. above my board. So they can look at it every single day.
Yeah.
And all I'm going to do when they start doing something bad, I'm just going to point to the sign.
Okay. So let's address another friction point.
Okay.
Intelligent design.
Yep.
Okay. So some believers argue that certain biological systems are too complex to have evolved step by step. They claim that this points to direct intervention.
Right. So in his book, Miller kind of responds to those claims.
Yeah.
He spends a significant portion, actually, of the books respond to those claims. And he critiques the idea that irreducible complexity, I guess, showing that many systems thought to require all the parts simultaneously actually have functioning intermediate stages.
Okay.
Okay. So his concern isn't with believing in a designer. It's with using scientifically weak arguments to defend the belief. Because if those arguments collapse under scrutiny, faith can take collateral damage.
Yeah. So again, it's not faith versus science.
Right.
It's bad science creating unnecessary crisis.
Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, let's be honest though. For many people, this isn't just abstract theology. It's personal. They were taught that accepting evolution equals rejecting God. So when they encounter strong scientific evidence, they feel like they're forced into this binary choice.
Right.
And that's traumatic for some people.
Yeah. And I'm going back to what you just said, like where you said it's not bad science, it's this, or it's not faith versus science, it's bad science.
Yeah.
I think when people have that idea that evolution equals rejecting God, I think that's bad theology too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
it's one of those things where both sides have to be willing to concede a little bit to certain things.
And Miller's entire project is to dismantle that false dilemma. Like that's his whole point. He argues that evolution removes a certain picture of God, the micromanaging engineer that inserts parts as needed in our everyday lives, but it doesn't eliminate the possibility of a sustaining law-giving creator. Like the conflict, he says, is between evolution and a specific theological model, not between evolution and the belief in God itself.
Right. So here's where we are. Evolution challenges literalism.
Yes.
It challenges certain doctrines tied tightly to biological timelines. It challenges the idea that complexity always requires immediate supernatural assembly.
Yep. But
it doesn't automatically erase faith. What it might erase is just a fragile version of faith.
Right. And that really sets us up for the final movement of this symphony.
Yeah.
If evolution forces us to rethink how God creates, what does a coherent model of coexistence actually look like? Okay. Okay.
All right. So we've explained the science. We've acknowledged the tension. So now the big question, if evolution is real and the scientific case for it is strong, then what does a coherent model of coexistence of the two actually look like? Not denial, not dismissal, not let's just agree to disagree, but what does actual integration look like?
Right. Well, I think the first step in this, kind of digesting all this, is the category clarity, right?
Yeah.
Science answers questions about mechanisms, how processes unfold in the natural world, what those components of the process are, how they interact. Religion kind of addresses questions of meaning, purpose, moral responsibility, and ultimately reality.
Yeah.
The conflict tends to happen when one category tries to swallow the other.
Yeah.
It's like you said, they're not living in coexistence. They're living as one over the other. Evolution describes how biological diversity is developed, but it doesn't attempt to answer why the universe exists.
Right.
Why moral laws bind us, or whether consciousness even has transcendent significance. He's very careful when he speaks about this distinction in his book. He doesn't argue that evolution proves God. He argues that evolution doesn't disprove God unless your concept of God is tied to a specific scientific gaps.
Yeah. So let's name one model for coexistence clearly as theistic evolution.
Okay.
So that's the view that God creates through evolutionary processes rather than in spite of them.
Yes. In that model, natural selection isn't competing with divine action. It's a mechanism through which creation unfolds. So instead of imagining God assembling species like separate sculptures, I want you to imagine a universe given the capacity to generate life, complexity, and eventually consciousness.
Yeah.
Miller leans in that direction right there. He suggests that the creation capable of genuine development may reflect a deeper kind of divine wisdom than a creation that requires constant supernatural intervention. It's less about God tinkering and more about God sustaining. It's almost like God planned everything. So he's letting everything just kind of unfold naturally.
Yeah. So the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, those aren't threats to God. They're expressions of a consistent creative order, just like, what I think what I said in the beginning, science is just the methods through which God works.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that really was kind of one theory, right?
Yeah.
So that was the theory of theistic evolution.
Yeah.
So another piece of coexistence is rethinking how we can read Genesis, like you said.
Yeah. So if Genesis wasn't written as a modern scientific account, if it's ancient Near Eastern theological literature, then maybe it's answering different questions entirely. So not questions like how old is the world? When was it created? Things like that. More like who created?
Right.
Why are we here?
Yeah.
What is our relationship to God and to one another?
Yeah.
Not how many radioactive isotopes were present in Precambrian rock.
Right. Yeah. Reading Genesis as theological proclamation rather than laboratory report doesn't diminish its authority. It clarifies its purpose almost. The ancient world wasn't asking about DNA or geological epochs. It was asking about meaning and identity and covenant. If that's the genre, then evolution doesn't necessarily threaten it.
Yeah. Here's something that fascinates me. If the universe unfolds through consistent natural laws, that implies stability, predictability, reliability. And those qualities are what makes science possible in the first place.
Yeah. And that's what Miller makes an interesting philosophical move here. He's going to suggest that the world governed by consistent natural laws may be the only kind of world where genuine freedom can actually exist. And if God constantly overrides natural processes, then causality becomes unstable.
Yeah.
But if the lawful universe allows creatures to act meaningfully within it, evolution then isn't God stepping back. It's a God allowing creation to participate in its own unfolding.
Right. It reframes evolution from God is absent to God empowers a creation capable of growth.
Right.
So, okay, let's circle back for a second to human uniqueness, because even if evolution explains our biological origins, it doesn't settle whether humans possess moral or spiritual depth.
Right.
We write symphonies, we construct ethical systems, we ask metaphysical questions. evolution can explain cognitive development, but it doesn't fully account for why we care about truth or justice in the first place.
Yeah. Science can describe brain states. It can't derive moral obligation from chemical reactions alone.
Yeah.
That's only one part of it. So accepting evolutionary biology doesn't require abandoning human dignity. It just means our bodies have a history. And honestly, there's something awe-inspiring about that history. We're connected to every living thing on this planet. And not even the planet, but the universe. We're connected to atoms in our body. We're forged in ancient stars. That's like when I wrote my wedding vows.
Yeah.
That was one of the lines in it. He ain't anymore, but he was back then. The best little collection of molecules in the universe. But, the biological process that shaped us stretched back billions of years. And it doesn't diminish us. It really it situates us.
Yeah. Instead of being less special, we're really more connected.
Yep.
So why does this conversation even matter? Because a lot of people have been told that they have to choose science or choose faith. They've been told that you have to choose evidence or choose meaning. And that's a very binary choice. I think it's very unfair to ask people of a given faith to make that choice, that it's either or.
Right. But I think, honestly, that's really a false choice.
Yeah.
Evolution challenges certain interpretations, and it may force theological ideas to be refined, but refinement isn't destruction. It's an evolution.
Yeah.
It's if truth is unified, then biological truth and theological truth ultimately come from the same source, the same place. And if they appear to conflict, the tension's really, the tension may be our understanding, but not in reality itself.
Yeah. So maybe evolution isn't the enemy of faith. Maybe it's an invitation.
Yeah.
An invitation to mature belief, to move beyond fragile frameworks, to hold science seriously without panicking spiritually.
Yeah. And this is a very scary thing. That's why people fight it all the time. It's a very unnatural thing to reflect upon yourself.
Yeah.
To reflect like inward,
Yeah. It's almost like when I try to think about the concept of eternity, it freaks me out.
Yeah. To recognize that understanding how life develops doesn't eliminate the mystery of why there's something rather than nothing. Evolution explains the process. It doesn't erase wonder, though,
Yeah. I mean, if anything, 3.5 billion years of unfolding life culminating in two guys with microphones having a conversation, this conversation, that feels like a story we're sitting with.
Maybe. Maybe.
All right. So what are your final thoughts on evolution as it fits within the science and religion, not debate, topic?
Like I said earlier, I think it's a paradigm shift. I think you really have to kind of reshape how you take, scripture and thoughts on spirituality and really reflect inward and come to a peaceful place, that both things can be true at the same time.
Yeah. I think, and I think it's good that you use the term paradigm shift, especially for all you Stephen Covey disciples out there. Talk about faith and belief. But those 7 habits are like the new 10 commandments to some people. But, it does. It requires you. And that was something that, I had to struggle with. Like I said, being raised Southern Baptist, they never opposed each other in this. But they let me figure things out for myself. My mom was much more of a Southern Baptist literalist, while my father was much more of a, think for yourself and figure things out kind of person.
Yeah.
And it was a genuine struggle for me to come to terms with that, to shift that paradigm and to realize, wait a minute, these are not opposing viewpoints here. These are, speaking of science and religion, these are two things that can work together just if you look at it from a different perspective, and that makes perfect sense in the long run.
Yeah. But to challenge that paradigm shift, you really have to have strength in your, I guess, system.
Yeah.
Whatever you believe in.
Yeah.
To know that it's not diminishing it, but strengthening it.
Yeah. But again, it's, you have to still keep your mind open to maybe not every specific thing that you've been told is exactly as it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, for some people that takes a big leap of faith, frankly. All right. Trivia?
Yeah. You want to do religious trivia?
Sure. Why not? You got some?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Grab that book.
I was about to say the book does though.
Does it really?
Yeah. Oh, wow. You know how each section starts with not a question, but just a little, did you know trivia tidbit? The youngest pope was only 11 years old. Wow.
Who was it?
It didn't say.
Hey Siri, who was the youngest pope? Pope Benedict the Ninth, who was 11 years old at the time of election.
Wow. Talk about a leap of faith. Oh, and these are about world religions, by the way, not just Christianity. Quiz 1. Number 1. What is Islam's holy book?
The Quran.
Yes. The oldest route to Santiago de Compostela, first taken in the 9th century, is referred to as the original way, or Camino Primitivo, and begins where?
In the Alamo basement. Under the Vatican? I have no idea.
I've never heard of this place. Oviedo.
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Number 3. Which religion uses the Avesta texts?
I have no idea.
Oh, I was right on this. Zoroastrianism.
What is that?
Freddie Mercury was one. That's about all I know about it.
Okay.
I think it's derived from, I think it's a religion related to sort of like Hinduism, sort of, maybe.
Okay.
I'm not sure, though.
I got you.
All right. Number 4. Shintoism is associated with which country?
Japan?
Yep. And number 5, if traveling the way, capital way, of St. James pilgrimage on a bike, what? If traveling the way of St. James pilgrimage on a bike, what distance needs to be traveled to receive a certificate of accomplishment?
10 miles?
No, a lot more than that.
Is it mileage or kilometers?
Well, they have it in both.
100 miles?
No, it's a round kilometer number.
I don't know.
200 kilometers or 124 miles.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm not getting that medal.
No.
So I was going to ask you this one, but I'm going to switch the question out. So quiz 7. Okay. How many popes have been of Spanish origin?
Oh, I don't know.
That's a low number.
3?
What? 2.
2?
Yeah. This is the question I'm going to kind of throw out. How long did it take God to create the universe?
Well, technically 6 days, because on the 7th he rested.
That's exactly what it says. Where was Mother Teresa born?
Oh, because her full title is Mother Teresa of something. And I don't remember. Guadalupe.
No, Macedonia.
Macedonia. Okay.
Yep. According to the Bible, how many years did Jesus live?
Is it 32?
33.
33.
33.
I always get it wrong.
All right. What has no reflection, no shadow, and can't stand the smell of garlic?
A vampire?
Yeah.
What?
This category is religion and mythology.
And mythology. Yeah, that's
okay.
true.
Okay. Yeah. That's okay. What religious group produces the magazine The Watchtower?
The Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode of From Art to Atoms,
The Ultimate Curiosity Show.
Next week, we'll move from biology to cosmology. But for now, that's evolution. Not versus religion, but in conversation with it.
Best friends.
Have a great week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to From Art to Atoms, The Ultimate Curiosity Show, episode number 48. I'm Michael Fultz, alongside Brandon Shoemaker, and this show is produced by Brandon Shoemaker. Every episode, our goal is simple: to follow curiosity wherever it leads, through art, science, history, and the ideas that connect them all. If today's conversation sparked a question, challenged a way that you think, or made you pause and wonder, well, that's exactly why we do this. You can find From Art to Atoms on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen. Subscribing helps you stay connected as we continue exploring the big questions and the small details that shape our understanding of the world. Curiosity doesn't stop when this episode ends, and if you have any questions, a thought, or even a topic you'd like for us to explore, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at FromArtToAdams@gmail.com or join the conversation online on Instagram and YouTube at From Art to Adams and on TikTok at _FromArtToAdams. If you enjoyed today's show, consider leaving a rating or review. It's one of the best ways to help this podcast reach even more curious minds. Thanks for sharing your time with us, and until next time, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and never stop being curious.